Okay, well, good morning, folks. Thank you for attending the ARC Forum. This is we're almost through the hump, as they say. This is our last session this morning, and we do appreciate your sticking with us, and I hope you get some interesting and informative information, and we'll hopefully address some interesting topics during the panel discussion once we have all the speakers go through. My name is Tim Shea. I'm a senior analyst at ARC, and in addition to focusing on the upstream, midstream oil and gas segment and a few other things like compressor monitor and monitoring and control turbines and things like that, I also look at drones and robotics. So this kind of session will mainly focus on drones, that are empowering automation, inspections, and a growing focus on sustainability. And so I'll start off with a quick housekeeping. They just ask that you silence your devices. There's an ARC app which you can provide feedback both on this session and the forum overall. So we appreciate your, certainly welcome any and all feedback you have. And you can check the ARC app. It's kind of late in the day, but you could have checked your ARC app for all the different agenda items and networking events and things like that. And then obviously most importantly, prepare and get a chance to ask your questions during the panel discussion, and probably with we hope to plan about a half an hour for that. So this is kind of some high level research we've been doing over the last year or two. We've got ARC's been covering the traditional fixed robot market for decades now, and we also have a growing team and supply chain looking at autonomous mobile robots used in, say, a warehouse and things like that. But my focus has been on drones used primarily for the process industry, so oil and gas, chemicals, electric power generation, electric power T&D, and things like that. We're finishing up hopefully a study at the end of this February on drone inspection services. We've also done some robotics, and when I mean robotics, I'm talking about, if you've seen the Boston Dynamics quadrupedal robot, there's some wheeled or tracked type devices that different companies have, and then I think we'll see probably a growing influence of bipedal robots at some point in the coming years. And there's a few other form factors like snake-like or crawlers and things like that. So there's different form factors, if you will, that people use for various applications in the robotic space. Since the focus here is obviously on drones, these are some examples of the different types of drones. You got the predominant share of the market based on our research is the multi-rotor type drone you can see on the left. Then you've got your sort of fixed wing one on the right, and then a growing area of interest I think is going to play an increasing role in the future is these drone-in-the-box solutions that were operated by autonomous. Basically, you see the enclosure. It's usually weather-proof, and it has a charging setup inside. It's also got some communications capabilities. The thing opens up. The drone basically flies on its own, a pre-programmed mission or something, then returns back down, and then most of them can self-charge and then get prepared for the next mission. So I think that's going to be an area that we'll see a real growth area, because I think with the advancements in autonomous technologies that may be used for a vehicle or whatnot, I think we're going to see a lot of activity. And you're taking the drone, it's really becoming a mobile inspection platform. Same thing with the robotic, because you're adding in intelligence analytics, whether that be edge or cloud computing or both. That's where I think the future is going to be. It's going to be where the drone, in many cases, will be perhaps as an advisor, but we have the great crew change going on in the various process industries. So I think these will be, if companies are challenged to find personnel, these technologies will be able to replace them. But the number one driver, as I mentioned up above, is safety. So that's not having someone go into a nuclear power plant or electrified substation area, or climbing a 300-foot flare stack or something like that. So those are the type of applications where we see this remote locations, emergency response for electric power providers and things like that. So that's and obviously I think COVID, as we all know, kind of accelerated this whole push towards remote operations, and increasingly a lot of companies are looking at autonomous operations, and I think obviously drones and robotics will play a role. Applications, as I mentioned, it's the kind of the hard to reach or dangerous type applications are what's the initial drivers of people investing in drones and also robotics. But some of the major applications you'll see are inspections. It could be thermal, on a utility line or something like that. It could be surveying, mapping, inspections of, going around perhaps a refinery or an offshore platform or something like that, doing various inspections and things like that. Those are some of the key applications that we're going to see. Stockpile measurement and mining and things like that. And obviously, using these tools to to develop things like digital twins. I think you can go out and use these drones to create a digital twin of an offshore platform or whatever the case may be. And so I think that's going to be an area where we're going to see a lot of interest and demand for that type of technologies. And I think as the adoption increases through the let's just say that the two major major hindrances of greater adoption are battery technology for the primarily and regulatory aspects that FAA and other countries have their own respective sort of avionic regulatory aspects. And that's something that's we're seeing some progress with the FAA. They kind of move slower than obviously most people would like, but they're moving towards the companies trying to push for type certifications. If you're familiar with the drone situation, you got a visual line of sight, which you have to always be in contact visually with the drone. You may have to have spotters and either on the ground or in planes and things like that, or beyond visual line of sight, where you can sort of fly obviously beyond the visual line of sight, but you can only fly at certain altitudes. In many cases, you have to have an observer or things like that. So those are, and again, those BVLOS waivers that you apply for, say if the FAA receives 100, my understanding is they've approved less than 4%. And most of those are utilities that are used for emergency response. And I think BP was an early adopter. They got approval to use these on the North Slope. Of course, there's no one there but moose and bears and things like that. So there's not a real threat of these things crashing into human beings. So, which obviously is that's one of the concerns the FAA has, and the various regulations, flying at night, flying over people. So they're working together with the suppliers to advance these regulations. And as that happens, I think you'll see a greater adoption in the U.S. and obviously other countries across the world. One of the things I found that's a real plus of drones, and I guess you could say robotics, is the ability to sort of do an automated inspection. Because let's face it, if you're asking a technician to go around a plant and read dials and do all these maintenance tours and things like that, sometimes there's a human tendency to cut corners or whatever the case may be. There's not a reliable assurance of the same quality. You get different inspectors have different levels of quality and diligence. So the ability to have these drones and robots to go around and consistently do the same program route over and over again, you got to get good data quality, good data consistency. And then with the if you add in the ability for analytics and things like that, you start to get the ability to do more automated reporting and things like that. So it opens up a lot of potential opportunities. I talked a little bit about the BVLOS waivers. That's obviously, if you're only getting 4% of those, it's kind of makes it a little bit harder to get these a lot of these missions flown. But and I talked about the battery life, but I think that there's some things that are happening in that area that hopefully will have a positive impact. Obviously, when we did our research, we tend to be a little bit more conservative. I've seen a lot of these different studies about the drone market is so big and it's growing so fast. And I start talking to these guys, and they say, well, where are all these drones? Because I know there's only so many refineries across the world, and there's so many, and then you find out that a lot of these numbers are highly inflated. And so and when you get down to it, my belief is that there is a drone market out there today. It's a lot smaller than people think, but I think that there's room for opportunity. And I think that that's going to be a reflection primarily of less restrictive, requirements from FAA and other organizations like that to kind of open up that envelope to allow greater mission capabilities. And I think that just the trend towards, you have this great crew change. You got a lot of folks that have a lot of gray heads with a lot of domain experience that are retiring. The challenge of trying to recruit that with the younger generation, and so I think that these drones can help fill that gap that companies may have in that area. So I think I expect to see them, becoming sort of initially a mobile inspection tool that'll, in many cases help advise some of the employees, but at some point down the road they may help actually fill in and mitigate the need to have a whole crew of people. Maybe instead of sending a crew of 5, you can only send 1 or 2, and then you have the drone do most of the heavy lifting in terms of the data collection and things like that. And so I think that'll help fill that challenge and resource allocation. And I talk a little bit about robots because I do think there's kind of a little bit of a synergy in many cases. In fact, AeroVironment, which was a sort of a military-focused company that did drones and things like that, they recently, well, last year, I think it was, they acquired a company called Robotics in Europe, and that company was focused on, these sort of tracked robots that had a little aperture, an arm or something like that. They'd be used for doing, ID inspection, law enforcement type applications, but there's some industrial applications that they can serve as well. So I think that they saw that the fact that, you have the drone for sort of a broader aerial perspective, then you have the robot to go in and do, some of the more tactical stuff when you have to get up close and dirty, and in some cases a drone may not be able to handle that application. So that's a potentiality that I think will happen. Obviously, we talked about that, the key of inspections and leak detection, I think, will be a pretty sizable application, more for the fixed wing type drones, because they can fly longer distances and things like that. And I think surveying and mapping and creating digital twins and things like that, there's certainly some applications there. I think in terms of the robots, like for example, Boston Dynamics was now sort of incorporating a movable arm. So they were showing videos of the robot kind of being able to open, theoretically turn a door handle and things like that. And I think as that technology on the actuator side improves, I think you'll start to see more applications opening up. And a lot of these like companies, they kind of want to open up their drone APIs because they want people to develop various applications and technologies and different types of sensors that they can incorporate, edge computing. So there's a lot of things going on, and I think that they're trying to view their robot as really kind of a mobile inspection platform. And they're trying to, encourage the development of an ecosystem, which I think, as we've all talked about during this, conference in digital technologies, you need an ecosystem because not one company can solve everything. It's just not possible. And again, as these robots are tested on offshore platforms in various parts of the world or other applications, and those are proven out, then the companies, I would imagine, they'd probably look for additional areas or applications which these drones and robots could be deployed. Okay, so this a little bit just some of the I talked about Boston Dynamics. That there's a couple of companies that have a similar quadrupedal type of look. There's Anybotics out of Switzerland. There's Unitree in China. There's a company called Ghost Robotics, which is actually being sued by Boston Dynamics right now for possible technology infringements. There's some of these wheeled or track type devices. There's actually a company called, I think it's SMP Robotics, that have like sort of the four wheels. They kind of fly around. They do a lot of physical perimeter security types applications or leak detection, things like that. So those are various types of applications. And I haven't shown the ones that they'll crawl inside a pipe or they'll crawl on the side of a tank or something like that. Those are other applications that can be had for these devices. And a lot of the same drivers are found with robotics as drones. It's really safety is the number one driver. Again, you get into the ability to do the sort of routine, over and over going routine inspections and things like that, so you get good data consistency, data quality. I think that the autonomous aspect, it's interesting when you talk to the robot guys will say, oh, our robot's autonomous. It's really a guy, 10 feet away, with a joystick, directing the robot. And so what they've been working with some of the drone guys who take the technology from the vehicle side, and it's much more autonomous when they have the various types of, detect and avoid types of technologies and things like that, where the robot actually can really be more autonomous in a sense, like we're seeing in drones. So that technology sharing, I think, is going to go a long way to helping to generate adoption. Some of these, you're looking at Boston Dynamics. If you're not even without any payload, you're talking enterprise version is at least $150,000. If you start throwing in sensors on top of that, you're talking $250,000. And a lot of companies, unless it's really a critical safety requirement for like a nuclear power plant or a highly electrified area in a substation or something like that, they're less hesitant to just have the robot go around at that price point and do the dials and inspections. And so I think they're all working to try to drive the price down, which will certainly help with adoption. Obviously, like drones, these robots, they can operate for about 2 hours plus or minus, and they have to come back to the base and recharge themselves. So that's obviously a technology sort of inhibitor in a way. I think we'll see more commercialization. Again, we're talking about the ecosystem, and as that continues to develop and they add new functionality, I think that's going to help generate more demand. And I think, and you look at both of these drones and robots, it's like anything else we see at ARC. It's really the challenge of a lot of companies trying to have, if they don't have the internal domain expertise or, they need technology partners to help them. And that may be, setting up, integrating the robot and drones into their maintenance systems or whatever the case may be, getting all that data, integrated properly. It could be, some companies are out there right now, they're providing, robot as a service, a drone as a service, or drone inspections. They'll take them, usually they'll use a DJI or some other type of drone, and they'll take their pilots and inspectors, and they'll provide a service to certain companies, obviously for a fee. So we're seeing some of that market there. But I think really the last point I want to make is that, as with anything, it's a new technology. So I would say, if you haven't really looked at, your autonomous roadmap, if you will, if you're an oil and gas company or a chemical provider or something like that, you need to sort of look at where you think, if you have autonomous roadmap, where do you see drones and robots coming on? And I always think big, but start small. So I think, try to lay out the applications where you think there could be some real value. Obviously, anything that's dangerous or, routine or robot, there's dirty, what they call it, dirty, dull, and dangerous is the 3 Ds in this space, and you hear that often. So I encourage you to listen to the folks that are going to be presenting here and trying to look at their challenges and any successes they had, and we certainly welcome your questions during the panel discussion. So thank you.